Hello again, and this week I thought we'd have a look at a bit of not antique silver. I know people are throwing their hands up in anguish and saying, but he's a purist, he's all about antiques. Well, I'm all about beautifully made things, and for the most part they are antiques because mechanisation in the 1830s and sort of falling of standards means that quite a lot of modern stuff, even well-designed modern stuff, is quite grim. Injection moulded plastics and that sort of things we can do without. But artisans and artists work throughout the 20th century, and they're working today. And they still, in a minority, produce beautiful things. So I want to have a look at this three-piece tea set. Don't fall asleep. What did he say? It's a 1950s three-piece tea set. Don't turn off. It's more interesting than it sounds, and it has a wider point, and which I'm going to sort of get to in a minute, which will apply to everything. It's about looking and the reasons that things are made. Well, I spotted this three-piece tea set a few months ago in a local sale room, and I was taken by the design of it. And when I read the catalogue description, it was by a maker I'd never heard of before. More shame on me. A man called Frederick Newland Smith. And that piqued my interest. So I did a little bit of research, as we can all do these days on Tinternet. And I found out that Frederick Newland Smith was a very well regarded silversmith, working in Manchester. In fact, he was head of the Manchester School of Art silversmithing department for 30 years. He fought in the First World War, and in the middle of the Second World War, he retired and moved to Welwyn Garden City, where he helped establish the Welwyn Craft Workers Guild. And you'll see this throughout mainly the earlier part of the 20th century, but it recurs at various points of little regional centres drawing artistic people to it, and them setting up a little guild or a craft workers school, basically to promote largely handcrafted arts and skills. And the Welwyn Craft Workers Guild drew in people that were calligraphers, were weavers, were silversmiths, were woodworkers, and they all took turns being, deputy chairman and president and what have you. And usefully, as an online resource, there's a fantastic sort of handwritten record of all the guild members, beautiful calligraphic script, and each member has a page dedicated to them, highlights of their life, how they were involved, things they made. And you can go and you can find that, and actually I'll post an image of that on Instagram again after you've had a look at this, and you can see Frederick Newland Smith's page for it. But very interesting maker, and I bought this three-piece tea set against stiff competition from terrible people. I have to break it to you, but when you get involved with antiques, there are all these terrible people that always bid against you at auction. It's very depressing. But I was victorious, and I went and I collected this, not having seen it. And I can honestly say that when I bought it, having sat with it for an hour looking at it, I'm jolly glad I did buy it, because my goodness. But let's have a look at it first. Let's have a look. It's your standard teapot, little milk or cream jug. By this period, it's a milk jug because of the size and capacity of the earlier ones of cream, and sugar bowl. Let's look at the sugar bowl first, because that's sort of the simplest thing that you can make. It's inscribed WH STH on the bottom, and actually so is the milk jug, but the teapot has got as is often the way, when you've got 3 pieces that are made for a purpose, you'll have one long inscription on a piece, and then you'll just have initials or crests or whatever on related pieces. And on the teapot it has WEH, in remembrance, STH, April the 2nd, 1953. So the in remembrance part is important to bear in mind, and also the initials, and we'll get back to that in a minute. But it was commissioned by somebody. Really, even though using silver in the 50s, people still did it. It was expected that if you went for tea, you had a silver tea service. But the commissioning, the individual commissioning of pieces of silver, rather than just going to Mappin and Webb or Walker and Hall on the high street and buying a set out of stock, is much more unusual. It usually indicates there's going to be something particularly good or interesting about that object, because someone, in the first instance, someone has taken the time to approach a craftsman to commission it. And this is certainly borne out by this set. But let's get back to the... See, I run off in all directions, don't I? It's very confusing. Let's get back to the sugar bowl. There's nothing really more dull or workmanlike than a sugar bowl. It's a bowl. In the 1950s, if you got one from Mappin and Webb or Walker and Hall, unless it was, really, really top quality, it would be spun on a lathe. They'd simply have a silver, machine-cut silver disc. They'd have it whirring around, and someone, even though it's a skilled job to spin silver, and it is, they'd spin it on a lathe very quickly and finish it off. Not Frederick Newland Smith. The thing that comes out looking at all these things is, first of all, that Newland Smith taught people for 30 years. So he was always looking at the silver in a slightly different way to someone that made it for 30 years in a commercial sense. He was always looking at the right way to do it and instructing people in meticulous techniques. And that's borne out by his work, because look at that. Can you see here? It goes in slightly. Most sugar bowls that you'll see, they're just sort of half an orange. They're half a sphere. Newland Smith thought about the design of this and had the fact that if you have the lip going just slightly over, slightly coming back, it holds the contents. If you're moving it, it's like two hands holding something carefully rather than just laying it in the palm. The shape was considered. It's all been, you can probably see, you can't see too many horrific reflections in that. Not like the snuffer stands where you're all scarred for life. You probably see it dimples and dipples in the light. This is all hand raised. It's all row after row after row of meticulous hammer marks. You hammer it with almost robotic precision. You hammer it, and you're turning it by the same turning and hammering, and then annealing in between to make sure the silver doesn't... Oh, he's on about annealing again, yes. Annealing it so the silver doesn't become brittle or break or split. The gauge of this, you can't pick it up, I'm sad to say. Well, not unless you buy it, but you can't pick it up and feel how beautifully made it is. So he's made this beautiful shape. That's the first thing he's thought about with the sugar bowl, the beautiful shape. Then he's put a foot on it, cast foot, and it's got it's all very simple decoration. There's nothing outwardly showy about it, but everything's done in detail. You've got a band here where you didn't need to have a band because it's a little stepped moulded foot, but that band has then had 3 little notches every few centimetres, just Three little notches, three little notches. You can barely notice them, but if they weren't there, a little bit like that line of stringing on a very fine piece of Georgian furniture, if it wasn't there, the whole thing would look less. And that's repeated on this rim here. And it's just got a little crisscross, 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 and then an engraved line up and down, joining at the crisscross, so they're intersecting. So it's sort of a tied line, moving line going along. And you probably can't pick it out too well, even from there, if I bring it very close. But it lifts the whole thing. It's very considered. That's just the sugar bowl. Then we move on to the milk or cream jug. You can say either. I'm not going to kick the door down if you call it a cream jug or a milk jug. I probably call it a cream jug more than ever. Now this has been made largely in the same way. It's all right, that didn't hurt it. Largely in the same way as the bowl. It's got that cupped in curving, that holding tactile form to it. But of course, being a jug, he's had to add a lip and a handle. And what a lip and what a handle. First thing to say about lips on jugs like this, normally, if it's commercially made, if it's by someone that doesn't know what they're really doing, they just whack a V shape in it so liquid pours out, and they're not really bothered about it. If he'd made this in clay, he couldn't have drawn out this more smoothly. If I put my thumb in, that's the natural, it's almost as if he's just pulled, as you would with a piece of thick, wet clay, just pulled the lip out. But of course he hasn't pulled it, because it's silver and it's hard and it's difficult to work. And what to us in a simple motion is very simple, might not even notice it, will actually have taken much thought and hours of care to form that beautiful, I hate to use the word organic, because, it makes me sound like I'm some sort of touchy-feely idiot, but this almost organically formed lip to the bowl. And that's gorgeous. You'll never see a more beautiful or sensitively thought out lip on any pouring vessel than that. It's a few hours or days of hammering, but there's 30 or 40 years of skill and patience behind it as well, and consideration. And the consideration only gets better when you get to that fantastic handle. Lots of handles on bits of silver at this date. They'll be hollow, they'll be tubular handles, they might have little insulators, they might not, and they'll just be soldered on. That is, I'm gonna ping it again. It's all right, it'll be fine. Dull thud? Yeah, because it's solid. It's one solid, thick, hammered, wrought ingot of a handle. But look how it splays in all directions. Again, it's almost as if you've got a piece of thick clay and you pushed it with your thumb into place, which of course takes seconds with clay. It takes forever with a piece of silver. And so that's been meticulously hammered and filed and shaped to precisely, it has to precisely fit the curve of this bowl. If it's out by a fraction of a millimetre, it won't join, it won't form a seal, it won't solder. That is meticulous engineering quality tolerance, all done by a guy at home, a retired teacher, albeit a silversmithing teacher, during, well, just after the Second World War, with a hammer, probably in a shed. My God, that's skill, isn't it? And again, look how it's wider here and it tapers. So it's not even a straight ingot. He's hammered it, he's tapered it in both directions and splayed it at both ends. Were that not enough for the simple sort of feat of silversmithing, he's engraved, as you often get engraved decoration in the 50s, this sort of very nice linear decoration that George Friend used to do for R.M. Gledowie on some of the very monumental pieces of silver that he made. You look at it, it's sort of a stylised wheat sheaf sort of effect. Now, even, when silversmiths do this, they might do the sides and leave it at that. Some will engrave the sides and the top, because you can see that part of the handle. And that would be enough for almost everyone. Not for Newland Smith. It is engraved. This will be hard. This will be bloody hard to get a picture of. My God. It must have been saying, can you see? Can you see? He's engraved that motif all the way around. He's engraved it there and under there where you'll never see it. You'll never see it. You're not, if you're using this, you're not going to pick it up full of milk and turn it upside down to have a look, are you? Everything is thought out and meticulous. Now, I'm rambling on. We are going to look at the teapot, but we're going to do it in part 2, as otherwise this will take forever. It'll take me half a day to upload it. So see you again immediately, almost immediately, in part 2.